Hello, everyone, and welcome back to week 3 of Mass Communication 310. This week, we are going to be talking about typeface, as well as fonts and hierarchies. You never knew that there was so much to learn about type and fonts, but there is. It's actually a really important part about design. Now, this video is going to go over a lot of the definitions of typography. And so I encourage you take notes. Feel free to pause or stop this video as you need. But this is going to kind of be a summary of font and typography definitions. You can also find these within your readings from this week. So it's important that we distinguish what we mean by type and typography. Type is the actual characters and letter forms through which we convey language. So, having the letter T is a type because it is a letter form or character through which we convey something. But typography is the art of using type in a conscious, professional way to convey message or meaning. And it doesn't have to be artwork like the one you see below, although that is beautiful. But even the type of font or typeface that you decide to use within your design actually conveys a lot of information to your audience. And so typography is the process of choosing that type or typeface in order to properly reflect your brand and your message in a good way. Now, type has the ability to convey a mood. It allows you to affect the audience's response. It also is an important part of defining your brand's personality and setting the tone for your message. So you need to find the right match for what your aims are. And remember, you have already done that by planning your design well before in that first branding design stage that we talked about last week. So you are really using that research and information to inform this decision. Now, typeface and font are two different things, although we often use these words interchangeably within common practice. Typeface is the whole family of characters that share the same design. So on the left, you see the Roboto typeface. So all of the Roboto family would be called the typeface. Now, the font is the set of characters within the typeface that share a certain style. So on the right, you see Roboto Thin, Roboto Light, for example. These are actually the fonts. So the font wouldn't be Roboto, it would be Roboto Regular. This may seem very small and trivial, but within the world of design, there are so many fonts within each individual typeface and then tons of typeface options that it's important that you know the difference. In addition, we have two different ways of determining what the height and placement of a font is. So the ascender line is the highest point of the font. This is the red line demonstrated here. The descender line is the lowest point of the font. So you'll notice that the ascender line goes to the very top of the H here, which is the highest part of the character, regardless of whether it's capitalized or undercase. The descender goes to the lowest point, usually through a lowercase letter that has the bottom or a tail. Now, the baseline is the bottom of the font's lowercase x. So if you were to type an X into this font, that would be the baseline. And the reason is that some lowercase letters go below the baseline, such as Y, P, G, P, and Y here in typography. The X height would be the top of the font's lowercase x. So if you typed an X, it would be where it is. You'll notice there are some letters that go above the X height, but this is how we define each font and how it is made through the ascender line, the descender line, the X height, and the baseline. There is also a cap height, which tells us the height from the baseline, the purple, to the top of the uppercase letters. And so sometimes your cap height and your ascender line will be the same. That's not the case in this particular font, where the cap height is actually lower than the ascender line. So it's important that we have these 5 areas of measurement. In addition, you have your uppercase letter, which is anything that is capitalized. You can make your whole word uppercase, or you can do it in sentence casing like we have here, where it's combined with lowercase letters as well. Now, lowercase are the ones that are lower on the line. And so knowing the difference between uppercase letters and lowercase letters is important when it comes to font. Now, a stroke is the mark that makes up part of the character, such as this side diagonal line on the Y. A shoulder is a curved stroke that forms an arch, like we have here on the P. The descender is any stroke that goes below the baseline that we see on the bottom of the P here. And an ascender is any stroke that extends above the X line, which again is the top of the lowercase x. So anything that goes above that X line is considered an ascender stroke. Now, an apex is where 2 diagonal strokes meet, such as at the top of this uppercase A. A crossbar is a horizontal stroke that links 2 strokes together, like we see for the uppercase A. A bowl stroke is one that is curved and creates an enclosed space. So one stroke that encloses the space like we see on this lowercase b. A spine is the curved stroke that makes the body of an S. So it's different from our shoulder because it actually curves down and makes an S. So a spine is the curved stroke that makes the body of an S. And a serif is a small extension at the end of some strokes. So you'll notice that there is no serif on these fonts right here. In what we call a sans serif. I'll go over that in a second, but a serif is just this little ornamental stroke that goes at the end of some fonts. The ear is the small stroke at the top of some lowercase g's. Some fonts have ears, some do not, but that's what this is called. It looks like the ear on a G. A terminal is the end of the stroke that has no serif. So if a stroke ends and it does not have a serif on the end, that little ornamental decoration, then it is known as a terminal stroke. The stem is a vertical stroke, such as you see here on the F, and then we have our shoulder on the top of the F. And then you have a stress line, which is the angle at which equal widths of the curved strokes sit. So for example, this stress angle is at exactly 90 degrees, but we could tilt the stress angle and create a different kind of font or stroke if we were making a new typography. So the tail is the descending stroke, and this usually comes with a Q, but some other letters or fonts will have tails as well. There are some more type definitions, including a ligature. A ligature is when you have 2 characters that appear as one because their strokes have combined. And so typically we want to avoid ligatures because they can be difficult to read, but there are some fonts that do this. So this is actually the word FI, but it looks like one character and it can trick the eye because it is combined. The point size is the size of the font. So this is also called font size on some programs, but it includes the space taken by uppercase letters, ascenders, and descenders. So you can see the different size fonts here. Obviously, the higher the point size, the larger your font is going to be. Now, the X height, you'll remember the X height line is where the top of the lowercase x goes, but the X height will gauge how big a font will look when it is being used. So when you have a low X height, you will have more space because you can see that it is much smaller, but the larger X heights are easier to see. So it is larger to the eye, where the low X heights are more compact and allows you to put more in. Now, leading is when you put space between lines. So this would be like double spacing your paragraph, for instance. So you want to avoid your ascender line and your descender line from touching, like we have here in the second example. Instead, you want your leading to be nice and evenly spaced, but you don't want them so far apart that it's hard for the eye to figure out where they're going, such as we see here. Next, we have tracking. This is how much space is in between each individual letter, but in tracking, they are all even. So the spaces between the letters are even. So you can see me extend the tracking or make it bigger at first and then bring them closer together next. So this is known as tracking because the letters or the characters are changing evenly. Now, kerning is when you're adjusting space between characters so words appear more evenly spaced, but the actual spaces themselves are not even. This happens a lot with uppercase letters that have long extensions such as T or F. And here it looks like there is a bigger space between the T and the E than the E and the X. But in reality, these are actually evenly spaced because it's spacing from the end of the T to the next character. So kerning allows us to bring the EXT in towards the T. Now you don't want it too close. Again, you want it evenly spaced so that everything looks similar. So kerning can help you adjust space so everything looks more even if the tracking or even spacing between letters does not do that. Now, those are the different definitions or different definitions for an actual font or stroke, but there are many different types or categories of typefaces. When you think about how many typefaces there are, you know, if you were to pull up a Word document and hit font, a huge long list comes up. Well, there are really 5 primary categories of typefaces, and this will help you determine which typeface to use within your design. So the first is sans serif. This means that it is just blocks. It's very plain lettering. So you're going to have no small extensions at the end of your strokes. This is commonly used in headings, logos, and also full text. It is easy to translate to the eye. It makes small sizes harder to read, though, because there are no extensions that increase the spacing or leading between the letters. And so different examples of sans serif font include Arial, Futura, ITC Franklin, Gothic, Helvetica. So those are some sans serif typefaces. Serif typefaces are those that have small extensions at the ends. They have the serifs, as we talked about previously. These are thin and or thick strokes that happen at the edges or ends of the strokes. You need to make sure that your serif is readable. If your strokes are too large or too thick, it can really affect the readability. But overall, serif fonts are really good for using everyday text because they are easy for our eyes to read. You can also use these often in logos, and they are considered a little more formal than a sans serif font. Examples of this include Times New Roman, Body Light Pro, Baskerville, and Perpetua. Now, a slab serif is a type of serif font. There are a couple of different types of serif fonts, so this kind of falls under the definition of serif, but these are based on Egyptian styles of writing. They are large and heavy serifs, so you'll notice that the weight of the serif is the same weight as the stroke. So it needs to be large in size. If you were to make that A really small, it would be very hard to read it. So slab serif typefaces work really well for grabbing attention in headings and advertisements and things like that. And you can see some examples of slab serif typefaces there. Now, a script typeface is one that looks like hand formed letters. So it's supposed to look like handwriting. These can range from very formal, like we see here, to casual writing. So we use these a lot with invitations or things that we want to look handwritten. A display font is one that should only be used for large headings or short messages because they are highly stylized. For example, this is the permanent marker font, and it is meant to look like you are writing with permanent marker. It's styled to look that way, but you would never use this to write a paragraph, for instance. So their font families are typically very limited. So you may not have a bold version of this font or even a light version of this font. You're probably just going to have the regular typeface. So we should be using display fonts for very highly stylized situations. But if you don't have a reason to be using a display font, like you don't have a specific purpose, don't use it. Now, a serif old style is another category of a serif font. It's based on hand lettering of scribes. And so it has normal serifs that are angled, and they're usually diagonally stressed. So you can see that the serif comes down at an angle, and the strokes are also equal in terms of the stress of their strokes. These are more formal, but also more readable. You could also use a modern serif font where the serifs are horizontal rather than slanted. And they also have very thin serifs as opposed to the old style. You can see even with the connecting stroke between the A's that the serif is very thin. These are considered a little more elegant. You want to use them in headings, but not the body of a text. So typeface families have a basic font, one that is regularly used. So if you weren't to select a different type of typeface, that would be the regular one. For a lot of these are Roman. So when we use Times New Roman, we're actually using the regular typeface. But then you can adjust it for different weights. A lightweight is one that has a very thin weight, mid-weight is kind of normal, and then heavy weights are meant to look thicker and bolder. We can also use italics within typeface families. We can use the condensed version for more narrow or compressed ones, or we can use wide and expanded typefaces to help with grabbing attention. But again, there is a readability issue with these, so don't use it regularly. When you're thinking about typefaces, if you have to use numbers, make sure you know what kind of numbers the typeface includes. So aligning numbers are ones where the top and the bottom, the ascender and descender, are all equal. So you'll see that if you drew a line, the top and bottom of each number would be the same. Where non-aligning numbers, which typically happen with more formal styles of writing or script writing, the ascender and descenders are not the same. So just be aware of that as you're designing. So when we are using fonts, we want to avoid distortions. We want to change the scale or the angle, but don't change the actual format of the font. You can see here that it has been manipulated so that it doesn't quite connect. It looks off. And so make sure that you are using the typeface family as opposed to distorting it within the actual design program. So you will have a second lecture video on fonts and layout coming up next. Make sure you watch that one. Then complete your discussion 3 on type. And in preparation for next week, make sure you do your readings on color theories. There are 2 parts for you in Canvas. I hope you guys are enjoying learning all about design theory. If you have any questions, please reach out. Otherwise, I will see you in video 2.